Really what I want to do is to offer some thoughts about what is it to integrate social media, internet, into the way we live in our modern world. And I'd guess that the thoughts I'm going to offer will possibly spark some questions, may leave you with more questions than answers. And if that's the case, I'll feel that I've done a fairly good job, because that's what I'm setting out to do this evening, is to spark some thoughts and to generate a bit of broader thinking about the meaning and the role of social media in our world, and to, I suppose, begin to help us all to think a little bit more and more deeply about how we integrate this in the healthiest possible way. So what I plan to do is to begin by offering some general thoughts about the internet, about social media and how it plays out in our world and where it has come from and where maybe it's going to. Then I would like to think a little bit about how younger people, our children and adolescents, might use and integrate and engage with social media and internet content. And I would finish then by thinking about what is the impact of social media on adult relationships, be they intimate relationships or amongst peers and friends and colleagues. Now, this friendly-looking chap is arguably the person who has brought us here this evening. This man, Tim Berners-Lee, was a computer scientist in the UK, is a computer scientist in the UK, who about 25 years ago set up the first text transmission between computers that weren't close to one another, and in the process set up what we now know as the internet and the World Wide Web. And he's credited really with having that defining piece in the evolution of the internet. And I suppose he humbly described his initiative as being trying to create a collaborative medium, a place where we could all meet and read and write. Now, I wonder, did he realize just exactly what he was creating and the huge extent that his initiative was going to bring about and changes in the way we live and the way we interact and communicate with each other? Did he realize just how powerful this simple system that he had come up with was going to be in recreating the fundamentals of our human engagement? Now, the web has undoubtedly changed the way we live, undoubtedly changed how we shop, how we connect, how we learn, how we do business, how we do so many different things. This chap is somebody that I'm sure you recognise, Mark Little, who used to be correspondent on the RTE News. And he made the news himself recently because he sold a very successful business that he set up a few years ago. And I think he's an example of how people have taken Berners-Lee's ideas and extended them, because he used this idea of establishing a collaborative medium, a place where people could meet, and brought it to a whole new level. His business was about downloading videos and content from things like YouTube or Twitter, verifying those videos and the content of messages, and seeing if they were newsworthy. And once verified, he would sell them on to the big international news media outlets. And in the process, he set up a niche company that has proven to be immensely successful and relevant. So once again, it's a sign of how Berners-Lee's original ideas have been extended. And that's something about the nature of the internet and social media and the World Wide Web as we're experiencing. It continues to evolve, and it continues to evolve at a pace. Now, the internet hasn't had, sorry, just one thing that Mark Little, I think he showed that his drawing of images and telling stories can influence the evolution of history, because we've seen things like the Arab Spring. We've seen how simple messages portrayed on something like Facebook can have powerful impact in transmitting the reality of what people in a certain war-torn country are going through, and can generate a groundswell that brings about political will for change internationally. But the internet hasn't had an easy ride. And it's not something that hasn't left people feeling a wee bit aghast at times. And people feeling a bit shocked and confused and wondering, what the heck is this all about? Many of us have been able to get our heads around sending an email or maybe Skyping and things, and this idea that computers can connect. But what Mark Little built on was a whole new evolution of the internet called the Web 2, which came about 10 years ago, when people were able to connect with one another in a whole new way. That was the birth of the apps, the social media platforms that are so prevalent at the minute. Things like Facebook, things like Twitter. They were born at that stage, and things have changed radically as a result. So Mark Little and Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook were very much on top of the crest of the wave and rolled with that, taking their very clever ideas and taking the new technology, and they were able to implement those ideas in a way that brought very significant newness to the way we communicate. Very clever stuff. So why do some people get anxious and a bit scared about all of this? Why are some people left reacting to it and wondering, where do we go with this? How should I manage this with my children? Is it safe? Am I the odd one out for worrying about my children and these things? What is an app anyway? A few years back it used to be, I don't know what a tracker mortgage is. It's now, what is an app? How do these things integrate into our lives? Can I trust my child? Can I trust my partner with this stuff? Mark Prensky was a thinker who put his ideas on paper and was one of the first to make a definition or a distinction between what he saw as digital immigrants and digital natives. Now, the natives are the ones who were born since the late 90s or early 2000s and who have been immersed every day in the internet. It's part and parcel of their lives. They've grown up with a whole range of social media applications that are central in how they view themselves and how they relate to other people. It's like the oxygen that they breathe every day. The internet and the social media are part and parcel of their lives. Now, by contrast, the digital immigrant is someone who has embraced the world of technology. They have taken on board social media. They probably enjoy it and have moments where they wonder at how clever this new app is and how it helps in their everyday lives. But somehow they know that it has a place outside of themselves and they're able to do without it. I'd add a third category to what Prensky says, and I'd talk about the digital exile, the person who knows that there's a digital world out there, but who make a very conscious decision that they're not going to engage with it. I have one friend who strongly and vehemently asserts her right not to have an email account and, get this, not to use a pass machine. Now, the digital native would wonder at such bizarre behaviour, while she's asserting her right to do life in her own way and not to be guided by this new wave of technology. But the internet and social media world moves really, really quickly. I read recently, in preparation for this actually, that some universities in the States are no longer issuing email addresses to their students because they saw that the email addresses just simply weren't being used. Now, did that mean that the young students that were coming to the colleges weren't communicating? Well, no, but they were just doing it in different ways, through instant messaging on their phones or their iPads or whatever it happened to be. And the colleges decided to go along with that, and now they're issuing iPads as learning tools for students, and they're sending out notes and things like that through that medium as opposed to the old method of email. So it's important to be aware and to keep in touch with what's happening in the world of social media if we're not to be left behind. But I think it's equally important that we don't allow ourselves to feel panicked in the process either. I'm going to come clean with you. I'm a digital immigrant myself. Now, I've said it, so it's out there. And much as I enjoy and as I marvel at so much of social media, I never feel that I fully get it. I love the quirks and the nuances of a new app that I might download and like. But I realise that these are things that make life a little easier and a bit more enjoyable, but I could do without them. Or at least that's what I tell myself anyway. I'm very well aware that there's a tendency within me to tut-tut as a digital immigrant. And occasionally I look around and I say, oh God, where are we going to with all this technology and social media and stuff? But I've become increasingly aware that I need to temper my thoughts and certainly my comments in light of my immigrant status. Because this status skews how I see the proliferation of social media, just as it skews an awful lot of what's written by clinicians or professionals or media people, because they too are very often digital immigrants who, like me, don't quite fully get this stuff in the way that the native might. And on top of that, there is a lack of unbiased, clear, broad-based, cross-cultural research that gives us very clear pointers as to what is the impact on people in using this material. That research hasn't been conducted in a substantial way yet. And I suppose in the absence of that, opinion and digital immigrant opinion, for the most part, is what colours and informs us. So it's important not to allow ourselves to become alarmist and frightened. Alarmists have always decried the ways of technologies and have been scared of it. And some years ago, people were thrown, many years ago, people were thrown when communities who had gathered at the river to wash their clothes and saw this as a great social outlet. People would come along and bring their children and spend the day doing the clothes and chatting and catching up on whatever bit of gossip and excitement was around. And then along came technology, and all that was changed, and people thought that society was being wiped out, that communities were being undermined. And there's numerous examples of this kind of thing over the years, where people have worried and wondered, what is the effect of this going to be? And I suppose what's important is our world hasn't stopped yet in the face of these changes that have come our way. Now, I'm conscious that I am praising the internet and social media quite a bit and holding up and almost arguing for it. But I know only too well that there is a real underbelly in all of this. And a big part of my work is what makes me personally cautious about some aspects of social media. I often meet people who experience a lot of hurt, a lot of distress because of their experience with social media. And this makes me think through aspects of what goes on for people whenever they're engaging with this stuff. The internet isn't all about booking flights or looking for the best recipe for a risotto. And a very significant amount of the internet is taken up with sexual or deviant content. Now, not everybody gets caught up in this, but for some, it can be a pathway to psychological turmoil, where they avoid, where they escape, where they detach, perhaps becoming addicted to online realities and behaviours. And it can have a real significant impact on people's relationships of all sorts. It can be unsafe for some people and can be dangerous for some people. Now, the average person will say, look, it's just a thing, it's out there. Use it, manage it, make the most of it. And they'll advise that you take a good degree of common sense. But we know that some people need a little bit of help in finding their common sense. If I might move on and think a little bit about the family dynamic and social media. And I suppose looking at this image, it's a rather sweet kind of an image of happy family stuff. And at a glance, it looks like real happy family scene, the family gathered together. But if you look a wee bit closer, you'll see that while the family might be physically together, they're all lost in their own little electronic world. Sometimes people spend quite a bit of time like this in family life, where they're dividing their attention between the television or the iPad or the conversation that's going on in the corner, or all three. One of the things that the digital natives are celebrated for is an ability to multitask. And it's argued that they have a capacity to engage with all three media that they might have going on at a particular time. And it's argued that they're actually learning quite efficiently in that way. This scene isn't one that's uncommon in family homes, I would think. But it certainly doesn't imply that this family isn't happy. It is a different way of doing family, but it seems something that's quite prevalent. Most homes expect to have a high-speed internet connection now, almost as much as they expect and need to have a gas or an electricity connection. Wi-Fi hotspots are available everywhere. People are very adept at finding a Wi-Fi connection that they can connect into whenever they're out and about. And children and adolescents have many devices that they can very easily connect to the internet through. It's not simply through a computer anymore. It's done through a phone, it's done through iPads, done through a games console, it's done through televisions. The internet is almost impossible to avoid at the minute. And successive Christmases or birthdays bring new items onto the wish list for young people and kids that will allow them connectivity. And the figures that are here are UK figures about just the prevalence of and availability of internet in people's home. And you can see that's a pretty high figure, that 93% of people have access to the internet at home. I would imagine that through Wi-Fi at home, broadband connections, telephone connections, that we would have a similarly high figure here. 35% own 5 or more devices that connect to the internet, and this is among children aged 9 to 16. 40% have smartphones. I saw an interesting piece of research that, again, it was the UK, that said that the numbers of young people who had phones was decreasing. And I thought, well, that's odd. It's hardly that they're not interested in this anymore. But it's because they're no longer needing phones so much, because there's so many ways of connecting free over the net, over the internet, by instant message or messenger services, that they don't need to have the phone for traditional phone calls as we might make them. And I think the last figure there, that the average users online is 13.4 hours, seems quite high. It's almost 2 hours now. I've reference to a figure later where that's maybe a little bit lower in Ireland, but it seems a lot of time to be spent online every day. There are benefits for young people in being connected and online and using social media outlets. They're undeniable. You know, people can stay connected, they can share their ideas and pictures, and they can make new friends. There's educational benefits. I think I mentioned about the way universities are adopting new education models and encouraging people to access internet during lectures so that they can hear a point being made and go off and get a point of information very quickly. And it's argued that employers are now valuing people more who are good and the best at accessing information rather than retaining it. I suppose that raises questions about what does our educational model need to be moving into the future? Is it about holding information, or about knowing how to source information and knowing how to use information on the move? Gaming is something that's very prevalent in social media, where people connect and play games together. Doesn't exactly float my boat, but I know for many people it's a fascinating world, and a world that can generate good connections, not forgetting the underbelly piece. But in all of this, young people are deepening their competence and mastery over a media that is going to be part of their lives for the rest of their lives. And surely that mastery is something positive and worthwhile. Now, this is a selection of comments from children pulled together by the EU Kids Online group, which is a fairly strong research group across the whole of Europe. And they look at young people's experiences and behaviours and the risks that they face online. And they also look at the way parents manage that and interact with it. And it's all aimed at informing policy and shaping how different nations can intervene in terms of supporting best practice. So in their research, they had groups where they sat down with young people and asked, what is it that gets to you? Now, some of the stuff on this sheet, I'm not sure if you can see it all right down to the back of the room, but some of the comments on here are enough to chill anybody, let alone a parent. One child who's 10 says things that bother him are horrid games, killing each other, battling games, zombies. A girl of 13 talks about dead bodies and blood and sexual images. Now, if you were a parent and thought that your child was being exposed to that kind of content, it would be deeply disturbing for you. And this is something of the reality that's out there. And this is something of the content that kids do seem to come across in their online behaviour. If children were to sum up themes of their behaviour, they would slot into these broad categories: online bullying, misuse of their own information. They're very aware of information theft and identity theft, unwelcome contact with strangers, sexual issues, and right at the top of their list of concerns are social networking sites. Now, you might think of those as being simply things like Facebook or Twitter, but there's a plethora of apps and social media sites that are geared towards young people specifically. You may have heard of Ask FM, which is one of those such apps where young people log in and has been found to be a real common place where bullying can take place. There's apps like Snapchat or Tinder, which are all geared towards helping young people to connect, but there's something of a sexualized tone to the way they're constructed and used. Interestingly, adults broadly see the same areas of concern, so it's reassuring to know that we're at one with our kids in terms of how we see the threats. We might structure the way we explain them a little bit differently. Talk about cyberbullying and the worry of sexual content. Parents and carers will chat about the impact or the potential impact on social development, and will worry about things like lost innocence. Parents also worry quite a bit about the digital footprint that children are putting down. When we take an image and put it onto the internet, we might say we'll delete it in an hour, but the image actually is there in cyberspace for the rest of time. Some young people can become addicted to, be it gaming behaviours, be it social networking sites, be it sexual type behaviours, in a way that impacts on their psychological well-being and development. Parents worry about mental health generally, and there is this new phenomenon of Facebook depression. There's a lot of pitfalls for young people, for adults too, in their use of Facebook. How many likes do I get? How many friends do I have? Why has somebody unfriended me on Facebook? These are challenging things for young people to navigate their way through. And parents worry also, something that isn't named so much by young people, about general health issues, body image, Obesity is the other side of the coin of that. They worry about diet, about sleep, the impact of using too much internet, not getting enough fresh air, etc., etc., etc. Parents, I think, are right to be worried and deserve to be worried about the internet. I think it's a measure of their concern and their love and their commitment to their children. Remembering, of course, the effort to try and have balance in that. And every parent struggles with this. How do I protect my children? Because sometimes they look at something as apparently harmless as Angry Birds and wonder, does it make for angry children? Or people will wonder about the latest friend request that their child or adolescent receives and wonder, is it the occasion that's going to bring stranger danger into their home? These are very real and valid concerns. This is a piece that featured heavily on social media sites in recent weeks, as people liked and shared it on their Facebook pages, etc. And really it appeals to the good parents of the world and proposes that there are inherent dangers in technology for children that can damage their brain development, impact on their social skills, their learning styles, etc. But much of the research that underpins the 10 reasons that are outlined in this relates to relatively old research and opinion. For example, it's about the effects of watching too much television from 10 and 15 years ago, and it appears that that's extrapolated onto social media. And it's not necessarily the same thing. I think it highlights the need for solid and substantial research in the area, but I think we must be cautious about latching on to the opinion or the offerings of anyone and everyone in this. This might be a case in point where a very well-meaning professional exposed their digital immigrant status and may have overcooked the issue a bit. So we need to be modest in our opinions, and we need to be cautious in our opinions and not go to the alarmist place. What we do know is very little about the impact of technology. That research is often contradictory, as I say, and sometimes fueled by vested interests. And also professionals have to remember that their opinions are very often formed by the outlier case. In my work, I meet people who are in difficulty and for whom these things have become problematic. But they are not representative of the broad population of people who are using these social media. And I think we have to constantly remind ourselves of that. Marketers and product producers are having seventh heaven when it comes to social media, because there's a whole new population and there's a whole new myriad of options around things, that products and apps that can be developed to sell on to this digital native population. There isn't any segment that isn't up for grabs in this, and up for grabs for exploitation, you might argue. Games companies have been particularly fastidious in observing young infants over a period of time and seeing exactly what their ability to engage with technology is. And they've shown that at 6 months a child can reach for a screen. At 9 months they learn the ability to swipe so that they can move something along on a page of a smart screen. At 12 months they'll point to an object of interest to them on the screen. And at 18 months, get this, a child is able to select, play, pause their favourite programme on Netflix. And that's something that is grist to the mill for the toy companies, because they'll be able to go out and say to parents, here you are, we have the perfect toy that is going to help your child to develop and to learn and to do it. What parent wouldn't fall for it? What parent wouldn't want that for their child? Personally, I think this activity monkey, as Fisher-Price calls it, is quite bizarre, and the thought of having an iPhone in the centre of a toy just seems odd. But these guys are on the money, and they have been doing their research. They have been measuring out what makes a difference in terms of boosting their sales, and these products are coming out wholesale. There's another one that I spotted on Amazon, a potty training yoke with the little iPad stand in front of it. I was pretty taken back when I saw that online on Amazon. 35 quid plus packaging and post, and it's yours. But of course, these developers, be it of toys or be it of computer apps, are on top of every nuance and quirk among young people and how they will interact with social media. So new games, new programs, new apps come by the day and perhaps are a little exploitative. What are realistic fears for young people? What do we know about how young people can interact with social media? Many professionals and parents fear that their children's brains, their perceptions, their learnings are impacted by overexposure to technology. But what are the real risks? These times, young people are described popularly as being more confident, more mature than previous generations. And in many ways, this is true. But the danger in it is that it can give rise to something of a myth that young people too are equally more responsible and wise. And that's not so. Can't be so. What we know is that for any of us as we were developing, that our brain develops at different rates. And the part of our brain, the striatum as it's called, or the pleasure pathway as it's popularly called, is one that develops quite quickly in our adolescence. And that's the one that sees something nice that we want to do, and boy do we go for it. And we get a pleasure reward from it. Now, unfortunately, the foil to that, or the balance to that, which is the part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, which is up here, and that's the part of the brain that helps us to make decisions and think about things and rationalise all those wise things that we think through and stop ourselves from behaving in certain ways. That part of our brain doesn't develop so quickly. And we know that it takes about 25 years for that part to be fully formed so that we have good executive functioning where we're able to say and make decisions and process stuff and think abstractly about things. If you think about somebody driving a car, it's the accelerator is working well, the pleasure piece, brum, and I'm off there, and the excitement and the thrill is good. But the brake pedal hasn't been finely tuned yet and can leave potential for risky or dangerous behaviour. And so, without a doubt, it falls to the people who are older and hopefully wiser than younger people to offer support, to offer guidance, to offer insight that is going to help people to realise and think through the consequences of possible risky behaviour. The reality is that young people's perception of online problematic situations can differ greatly from those of adults. One striking aspect of online behaviour is that it can feel anonymous. And this applies to adults as much as to young people. And it's a major element in internet behaviour. That feeling of anonymity can remove the thought that we're being watched, which is the external control. Somebody's keeping an eye on me, so I better behave. And that allows us to take down the barriers within ourselves that we might not otherwise do, which is our internal control. And out of that can come risky behaviour. And there's this other notion that we know about, risk attenuation. Psychologists love big terms. But this relates to how we're unable to use critical thinking and decision-making skills to discern more risky from less risky behaviour. So tune out from what constitutes a risk. Deny our existence to us. Tell ourselves it'll be grand. Tell ourselves that won't happen to me. And in the process, open up the avenue for risky online behaviour. And when this is at play, there's an increased chance of risky behaviour online, inappropriate decisions, dodgy moments, and the possibility that things can go wrong. If I might just go back for a minute to the EU Kids Online people that I mentioned a little while ago. Part of their 2010 research, where they interviewed about 24,000 kids right across Europe, including Ireland. Dr. Brian O'Neill up in DIT has led that research here. The kids were aged between 9 and 16, and they also had focus groups where they spoke with parents and relevant adults in young people's lives. Now, what I think the good news from the research is that there's pretty positive use of the internet amongst our young people. As I say, about 93% access weekly, 60% daily between home and school, 50-odd% at home every day. And the length of access, as I said, in Ireland, slightly lower than in other parts of Europe or in the UK that I mentioned earlier. And one of the good pieces about here was that parental supervision, parental involvement in saying, okay, we gotta talk about your internet use, is pretty high in Ireland, a little bit higher than in other countries around Europe. And I think there's something very encouraging about that. Now, all things are never as they seem, because these wise people at the EU Kids Online survey went on and extended their research. And last year, they looked very closely at what way parents were supervising young people. What level of involvement were they having and how were they interacting with their children, particularly thinking about managing risk. And they said that there's a restrictive type of supervision that's used, and that's about imposing boundaries and limits so that everybody knows where we stand here. The difficulty with this is that it tends to discourage discussion and active, engaged support and interaction with the younger person. The other type of supervision that they identified was active supervision. Now, this is one that permits greater access. It doesn't have so many limits and boundaries and recognises that, yeah, there are dangers out there, but let's deal with them as they come. And let's do that by having a very open and engaged level of discussion and active support so that if there is a risk there, it can be managed. Now, which of the two styles would you think was prevalent here in Ireland? Any thoughts? The restrictive. It is indeed. Any ideas what countries might have had the active style of supervision? USA, yeah, I would guess could be. Yeah. Scandinavia, yeah. Those bloomin' Nordic cousins of ours, they're way ahead of us on everything. I think, though, there's something about the active style of supervision that could put the heart sideways on parents a little bit too, because it involves acknowledging that there are risks there, that young people are going to be using the internet, and it's a good thing that they use the internet. So let's allow them to go closer to the risks, but let's be there with very firm scaffolding around them to support them in that. That's scary for a parent to do because it's allowing someone to go and closer to the fire.
It would encourage responsibility, though.
It absolutely, and that's the very thing that the research is highlighting, that it'll encourage responsibility. And more than that, what it encourages and facilitates is an ability to use the internet in the broadest sense, to get a mastery over it, that maybe isn't so whenever people are using it in the restricted boundary-limited way. So it's a way of empowering young people so that they can take this tool and use it really productively into the future. I suppose, though, this issue raises the question about us. Is there something in us that is reluctant to have the conversation? To actually sit down and engage and discuss in the messiness of an issue or a difficulty or a risk that might arise? Is it easier to step back and put the rules in place and expect that they're going to be adhered to? Because there's a risk in that in itself. There's a danger that if a young person is experiencing a very clear boundary around something, that they may be reluctant to tell if there is a risk. Now that would be something that would put the heart sideways in any parent, if there was something going on that they weren't able to tell, perhaps because they were afraid of losing the phone or having their internet access cut off altogether. Whereas the Scandinavian model would be more towards opening up things. And I see someone wanting to ask a question there. Could I ask you to hold it maybe till the end, because I know we're under a time dynamic here. Is that okay? Thank you. So, what can parents do? Well, I think an important starting point is to know your digital status. Are you immigrant or are you native? Now, I've come clean, and I think it's important that everyone would know where you stand in relation to this. Decide your supervision style, and my guess is we might have some discussion about that after I finish up. Upskill, be social media aware. And there's a whole host of other things that you can do. You can see there listed. Again, offer support and provide safety for children to come along and to get your guidance. Practice what you preach. Don't be the one who's putting up the rules around the internet when you're the very one who breaks them. So you can see a variety of them there, practical things that people can do. Now, conscious of our time and moving along, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we can maintain healthy adult relationships and integrate social media into that. Now, obviously, the internet has a range of positive benefits for adults as well. The ease of contacting people is really good. How amazing has Skype been for families and friends who are separated by distance? Social media can allow some people to make contact who otherwise might not find that easy in traditional ways. The general social outlets mightn't suit someone's temperament or personality, whereas they can make a contact online and bring that contact into the real world when they've established a bit of comfort with a person. So there's healthy, positive stuff for adults, and plenty of it. But there's also the underbelly too, and we can't deny. And the research seems to be showing that people report higher levels of loneliness now than over 20 years ago. We can't say that social media caused that, but it doesn't seem to have improved people's sense of connection. These are just some of the things that I feel can evolve when people become overly absorbed in internet or social media. And there's a lecture in any one of them. There's a lecture series in any one of them, Emma, if you like ideas. But I'd just like to pick out some of the social or psychological aspects. One thing that strikes me repeatedly in relation to all of this is that the impact of social media in relationships can be really hard to pin down. It's very vague, and it can seem insidious almost. And that's because these things are pretty pervasive and silent for the most part, and we're not quite able to name what the dynamic is. And if I'm fed up with my friend constantly putting everything we do up on Facebook, and I feel that I'm a fuddy-duddy if I say something, but I'm still annoyed about it, social media is impacting on me. Or if somebody's grumpy and out of sorts because of the tweets and the emails and the messages that they have to get back to, or they're wanting to get onto Facebook, and they go on and snap at their partner anyway, social media is impacting. What do you think is happening in this situation? I suppose if you say what you see, then this guy is busy on his phone with something, I'm sure, massively important, while she's looking away a little bit cheesed off. Now, this kind of dynamic is something that therapists are seeing more of in their therapy rooms in recent years. He's never off the phone. She's always on Facebook. We never seem to sit down and have a conversation anymore. We never have quality time together anymore. This situation is creating a kind of intermittent detachment within the relationship, and it can quickly cause difficulties for couples. No one minds someone taking a call or firing off a text, if it's limited to that. But when it's part and parcel of every day and every context, then it can be divisive and hurtful. Are you thinking of somebody who fits the bill there? Now, when we look at this scene from a different angle, we can see that there's a pair of them in it. She's as much engaged in social media as he is. So things maybe are never quite what they seem. And they might even be chatting to each other through social media, liking some comment that the other person has put up. This is a real kind of dynamic that happens. Commenting on what somebody has said, liking it and sharing it. Together, connected, but pretty detached. And this can be a real way for people to be together. The digital native will say, what's the problem? They'll argue that they're multitasking, that they're connected, that they're enjoying themselves. The immigrant will tut-tut and ask, what's wrong with people? Now, who is right? There's a bit of research from Oxford, and it says, done by an Irish guy too, it says that for couples who have 5 or more forms of media communication, that they report being less satisfied. Quite an extensive piece of research that was done in UK and Australia. That they were 14% less satisfied with their relationship than people who had more simple communication styles. And 5 forms of media don't take long counting up. When you have email, tweets, texts, Facebook, whatever else, help me out, but they're there. So this is a real piece of evidence that social media is not making people happier. In fact, it may be making them less contented in their relationships. So there's a disconnection emotionally that can easily happen between people. I spoke with someone recently who was really distressed because the pattern of social media use between him and his partner appeared to have impacted on their physical intimacy. So what problems does this lead to? Well, there is the digital generation clash where there's the immigrant versus the native, one person not quite understanding the other's behaviour, and the time that's been spent on these things. Someone might dislike Facebook and find it a problem if their partner's using it. Or there can be confusing communication. A few words of a text with a simple smiley face can mean one thing to somebody and an entirely other thing to another person, leaving them feeling a little unsettled in the relationship. There can be specific difficulties then. There can be jealousy. Who are you talking to in that thing all the time? What are you at? And a common problem now is if someone is talking to an ex-partner through Facebook. It can be immensely unsettling for their other partner. There can be constant checking of somebody's phone so that trust is becoming undermined and person feels the need to see, well, just what the heck are they at? But then there can be more complex difficulties, and that's where somebody gets into using chat rooms excessively, dating apps, and trust and fidelity comes up for grabs very much there. I once met someone who online met somebody from quite far away and very quickly fell in love with the person and decided that they were going to upend their life, leave their family, move to another country to be with this person who had brought about a radical transformation. Now, there was real emotion involved in that, But I think when the person started to look at it, and it was very painful for everyone involved, they realised that there was an avoidance of quite fundamental problems in the relationship. Another difficulty can be around the excessive use of pornography, and that's something that we see increasingly coming through the doors here. So what facilitates online infidelity or problems in relationship that are significant? Well, this triple engine that Al Cooper introduced, social media is affordable. I know people who have a second phone and it doesn't cost very much, so they can conduct their kind of other affairs outside of their main life. It's accessible, the internet is everywhere. And it's back to this anonymous piece again, that people can behave in a way thinking that their behaviour is not known or seen by anyone. There's very little that can be totally anonymous on the internet. I've worked with people who have been blackmailed because of some of the behaviour that they thought was anonymous and private. But they're the external pieces. What are the internal pieces? What's the psychological factors? I think there's personality issues that come along. So someone's disposition, somebody's personality type, somebody's attitudes, somebody's experience. Situational factors. So if someone's under acute stress or difficulty, they may resort to this as a way of escape. Somebody might want to explore sexual needs online. Or they may even have curiosity. And sometimes people think that's an odd one. But curiosity can be the first entry point for people to a world of behaviour that they may not otherwise have encountered or thought about, but that they nonetheless get sucked into. And when I meet someone like that, I'll take on board the curiosity piece, but I'll wonder with them, what brought you back? Why did you go another time into that site or use that app again? And that's what opens up the emotional difficulties or the social or personal difficulties in their lives. This model is one that I put together to try and explain what might be going on when somebody gets drawn into and lost in the social media world. I've spoken about this idea of intermittent detachment already, someone who's in and out of real contact because they're off thinking through their social media. Now, if that pattern continues, there's potential for continuous partial detachment, where somebody is constantly on that edge between interacting with social media and with people, and they're never quite satisfied between one or the other, so that they're left constantly searching for something else. So they'll check the phone or they'll dip in with another person, and they're flitting around, and it's hard to feel that you ever have their attention. It's almost as if they have something of an attention deficit. And if that pattern continues, there's every potential that the person will have enduring intimate difficulties, because they lose out on being close. They forget what it is to be close. They may not have known in the first place, and they'll not be able to connect with people in the way that we might expect. They might meet their emotional needs online, so there's loss of connection with other people. It's quite sad fact that there's a spike in erectile dysfunctions among young men. And that's because of the prevalence of pornography viewing. And the world of pornography is so vast that it simply saps up their ability for physical contact intimacy. So, how best can you navigate social media in your life? Well, I think there's a number of levels to think this one through on. You can identify how you'll use social media. What social media rules are you going to have? Where are you going to use it? When are you going to use it? Are you going to have the phone by the bed and check it last thing at night, first thing in the morning? Are you going to have it out in the restaurant with your friends? All those types of things you have control over and you have choices over. So your behaviour is very much in your hands to dictate. Be privacy aware. Know that anything you put out is available to a vast number of people and can be shared on. So there's no such thing as true privacy online. And just beware of what information you share and why. With your partner or with your friends, have social media boundaries. Be very clear with people as to what you expect from them. If you don't want your picture put up on Facebook, don't be bashful about saying it. If you have issues that come up with somebody, quickly name it. Not in an aggressive way, but just be able to put it out there. Look, I'm not comfortable with that. That's something I'm not happy with. Can you just hold back on it in future? And if there are, from the ICE model that I drew a minute, more particular difficulties that somebody is experiencing, if you feel yourself that you're having doubts about the quality and the direction of your online behaviour, or if other people are saying to you repeatedly, you want to watch that, or if you're unable to engage in real relationships, be they just general social relationships or intimate social relationships, maybe it's time to do something. Talk to a friend, talk to a professional, but don't allow yourself to be drawn deeper and deeper into something that in your core you may believe to be unhealthy for you. The work that I do here in the hospital is with people who have difficulty with their relationships, with their sexuality, in a whole host of ways. We aim to provide an opportunity for people to reclaim their relationships and healthy sexuality by providing respectful, by providing understanding, non-judgmental interventions. And these are some of the services that we provide here. Referral is through self-referral or through GP or through another professional. And we're happy to offer help in any way that we can. Always ready to talk with somebody and identify if there is some area of need that they might benefit from an intervention on. I'm going to finish up now, and I suppose we'll have a moment for questions shortly, and I'm looking forward to that. They say that psychologists are very good at answering questions with a question. I promise not to do that with your questions, but I would like to ask you a question or two just now, and just to bring you away from the headiness for a second and off to this lovely beach in Donegal, and to think a little bit for yourself about what is the meaning, what is the place, what is the role of the internet and social media for you? Are you a digital native or a digital immigrant? Or after tonight, are you going to become a digital exile? How does your status in that colour the way you view these things? Are you overly attached to your phone or tablet and all that it holds for you? Are there boundaries that you need to tweak for yourself? What are you going to do after today to put some of the thoughts that have been generated for you into practice in the way that you integrate social media in as healthy a possible way for yourself? Thanks for your attention.